Alright, so I am now in the process of fitting this 623 corner rib, which is what you see here. It comes a little long. From what I gather, this is a rib that was originally used on the RV6. So it's got an end treatment up here, and it's notched so it fits behind this flange here. That all gets cut off, and then you have to trim the back side here. This is a little long. You have to trim this as well. So this is the back half of the center fuselage. This is where the aft center section bolts. So this bottom flange here, I forget what this is. I think this is F706. This bottom flange, this bulkhead here, the bottom flange along the very bottom of the aft fuselage, that fits with this here. So that flange is going to fit underneath here, and it's going to come out this way a little bit. So this needs to be cut back far enough so that that flange won't interfere with this piece. But you want to make sure that you maintain edge distance on that hole there. So from that hole to the edge of this part, you want to make sure you maintain edge distance. And then you'll have enough room for that aft fuselage flange to come through here. And then of course you want to, hopefully that will end up being centered. I'll come back to that in a minute. Centered between here and here, but I'll come back to that. So on this end, all I did was cut this back. I cut this end back so it would clear this flange here. And you can see here the clecos. From those clecos to the end that I cut off, there's plenty of edge distance. Fitting this was a little bit of a pain because this is kind of formed with a curve. This leg here, especially this leg here has a little bit of a curve to it to try to match the curve of the skin right here. Same with this. The problem is it's not perfect. Now the instructions say you can flute this to get it to fit, but my piece here is actually curved too much in relation to the skin. So I didn't flute anything. I used this corner notch in this piece as a reference to line up with the sharp corner of the skin. So I used that as my alignment point. And then I cut off the two ends here and here and started to fit it with no fluting. So what I had done was I basically started at in the middle here, got this lined up best I could, drilled a couple holes, put a couple clecos, and then I tried to manipulate each end to get it to line up right. This side came out pretty good. I did this side first because I wanted to try to keep this centered this way. So this hole here would be centered. And I tried to maintain this edge here. Now there's a little give and take. If you run your finger across here, it feels to me like this flange might stick out past the skin ever so slightly, and by the time I get down here, it might be recessed back away from the skin ever so slightly. Of course, when you get the sides put on, I guess you can come back and file the actual skin. I don't recommend filing the flange, not that you could. Same thing here. This might be a little bit proud in relation to the skin ever so slightly, and you can visibly see here it's recessed. Now the reason I have it pushed back so far is because of this interface here. Obviously the side skin sits here and it's going to lay across this face as well. If I were to have this even with the skin here, this end would stick out too far and there'd be a definite step from this plane out to this plane if it was sticking out this way. And I didn't want that on my skin. I didn't want that crease or that step to show. So I tried to keep this somewhat even with this face. And again, when I fit the side skins, if it becomes an issue, I can always file this edge of the skin. But I didn't think it was worth the time and effort, and I don't know if you could at this point fit the side skin across here and try to get this thing to play nice with the bottom skin, this upright, the side skin, things like that. So I fit this one the best I could, and it came out fair. My biggest concern were the holes in the edge distance, and that worked out fine. So I'm going to keep it as is, and I'm going to move on to the other side. And here is the freshly drilled 623 that I was just talking about in place. Now I have it off, obviously. And a couple more things I want to make note of. If you look at the edge distance on these holes, from the hole to the bent flange, so from the holes to this flange on all of the flanges, you can see that the edge distance is just fine. There's no issue with edge distance on any of those in relation to the flange. And then of course you can see down here, this final hole here, the edge distance on that is also just fine all the way around. And the last thing is I made myself a note on these flanges here, and I basically just have a reminder for me to flute these flanges after the side skin is fitted, because this won't stand up by itself, will it? Nope. This when you look down this flange in this direction here, you can see it's got a curve to it. And since I don't know where the holes are going to be along this flange, I haven't fluted it, but that's just a reminder that this will get riveted to the bottom skin like it is, and the bottom skin will form to this curve just fine. It's a very minimal curve, a minimal bend. So the bottom skin will contour to that with no problem. Once I get the side skin in place and I start to do my fitting with the side skin, I can then make note of the hole locations and then flute in between those hole locations to get this flange to lay flat in this dimension here, because right now it's got a curve to it this way. And the same thing with this secondary flange down here. It's not as bad, but it's got a little bit of a curve, which will be taken out later. All right, so again, this one is finished. I'm going to move on to the other side.